Hey guys, it's Jack. I wanted to let you know that we're starting a new push for subscriptions here on Human Events Daily. So make sure that when you're listening to this podcast, you hit subscribe, you download it, and you share it with 5 of your friends. Make sure they're all going and downloading as well, because we need to get the signal out as much as possible. Look, we've done so much over the past couple of years since this show started, and we're only going to do so much more. Let's get it. This is what happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king.
We turn now to the war with Iran, and for the first time since it started, the Republican-led House today passed legislation that would force President Trump to stop all military action against Iran.
A passenger terminal at Kuwait's International Airport engulfed in smoke and flames with a gaping hole in the roof after an Iranian drone attack.
Spencer Pratt appears all but poised to face off with Mayor Karen Bass in the November general election in L.A.
President Donald Trump is expected to nominate Todd Blanche as U.S. Attorney General, removing that acting tag. Trump's former personal lawyer has been in that role since his predecessor, Pam Bondi, was fired nearly 2 months ago.
President Trump has signed a new executive order today focused on artificial intelligence. It lays the foundation out for federal testing of the world's most powerful AI systems before they're publicly released. Now, the testing would rely on voluntary collaboration from the nation's top AI companies.
President Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, has agreed to plead guilty to one count of retaining classified information under a deal with the Justice Department that could allow him to avoid any prison time.
It's very difficult to watch. It's difficult footage to watch, and I really feel for the family of Henry at this time, and I understand their point of view and why they're upset with the police. I understand that, and we get that. You know, to the family, you know, what would I say to the family? I'm so sorry you've had to go through this. And again, and I don't think sometimes it's cutting through, we are saying sorry for handcuffing and arresting Henry. We are genuinely saying that. So I think there is an argument and a narrative out there that there's two-tier policing. I do not recognise the term two-tier policing. I see officers out there day in, day out, doing their job for all communities, looking after people, policing without fear or favour. I don't recognise the term two-tier policing.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily. Today is June 4th, 2026, Anno Domini. We are dealing with a little bit of a system issue right now, so I am calling in to the show. I'm in here like this, but that's okay because we are going to talk. We're going to continue talking about the Novak uprising. And this is what we're seeing. It's not just the Novak uprising. It's so much more than that, because we're just now seeing, as the trial kicks off for Austin Metcalf down there just outside of Dallas, Texas, in Frisco, we now hear that Austin Metcalf's final words, which have now been revealed, were, "I've been stabbed. I've been stabbed." These are eerie parallels, ladies and gentlemen. These are eerie. This is an eerie situation. We need to come together. We need to come together as a people, as a country, as a society, and start to ask ourselves, what is going on? What is happening? What is going to be the way forward from all of this? Are we going to live in a society where we allow crime against white people to take a sort of prevalence, to take a sort of free path, to go and be allowed to continue? Are we going to continue to go to police and tell police, require police to attend racial training where they are told, and this came out, I talked about this on Fox News last night, the police in the UK are now required to take training in a policy that we revealed on humanevents.com, a policy that when they arrive on the scene, they have to take the races into account, and take the races into account because of the disparities or the history of policing in the past. Now, this may not make any sense to you, but it does make sense to a certain group of people. And I'm calling that group of people the anti-white. And the anti-white are the ones who have been pushing these policies. Because, folks, it's not about empathy. It's not even about sympathy. It's about being anti-white. And the fact that they are anti-white drives them to commit heinous crimes like that, to put policies in place like this. No, my friends, we need to stop playing the game. We need to understand this group. We need to understand their motivations, and we need to respond accordingly. We need to respond accordingly. When the typical conservative comes up and says, well, we shouldn't see race. We shouldn't see race and we should be colorblind. I agree. I personally agree. I think that all policing and all law enforcement and all institutions should be colorblind. I really do. I've said that my entire career. However, we now have a situation where they are not. We now have a situation where even law enforcement is not colorblind. Even when so-called knife crime is prevalent in the UK, one group of people is allowed to have knives because, again, of their cultural background, but everyone else is not. We can't have this anymore, folks. We can't have these two tiers of rules. We can't make up rules for different people because they are from different backgrounds. We have to hold everyone to the same standards. We have
in our way, and our golden age has just begun.
This is Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Now it's time for everyone to understand what America First truly means. Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
We're seeing, and some of the things that we're finding out about this situation with the anti-white. The anti-whites, whether they are in the U.S., whether they are in the U.K., whether they are anywhere. We need to find out where all of this is coming from. And to do so, we've got our guest on, Joshua Lysek here. He's the co-author of Unhumans, the co-author of Bulletproof. I want to have him on now. Joshua, how are you?
Doing well, Jack. Thanks for bringing me on.
All right, and Joshua, tell us what it is. You and I have sort of been tweeting about this idea of the anti-white. Tell us what it is and what's driving all of this.
Yes, well, as we explained in the original Unhumans book, I say as I wear the white boy summer hat that your brother Kevin so graciously gave me a couple of years ago during the campaign. As we explained in the original Unhumans book, cultural Marxism, we have to go back this far. We have to go back to the middle 19th century with the original Marxism that has sort of mutated into cultural Marxism. See, the original Marxism was an economic theory in which the haves were the oppressors of the have-nots, an economic industrial context. But because of free market capitalism, because of the success of the United States, countering that oppressive versus oppressed prediction model, communism became a cultural phenomenon instead. And so in the new world, the new cultural Marxism, we like to call it, the oppressor class is seen as the majority. And who is going to be the majority in the United States? Well, that's white people, specifically straight white males, Christian straight white males, I should add, have all of the intersectional boxes of oppressor checked, and all non-white, non-male, non-Christian, non-straight individuals are in the cultural Marxist worldview, which surrounds us like air, which is like fish swimming in water. So when you say, "Oh, well, where's the cultural Marxism?" Can you point to where the cultural Marxism hit you? They will snidely and sarcastically remark. But the reality is we subsist in that environment, and we have in that media environment and that political environment and in that legal environment for a very long time now. So when we consider what exactly happened to Henry, this young man in the United Kingdom, the police received this call that there was a young man doing a racism. And if you're doing racisms, well, then you need to be stopped immediately by men and women with firearms or other such weaponry. And so because Henry was accused of doing a racism by this Sikh family, the police arrived, and we explain and predict in the Inhumans book, Jack, as you remember, that in the cultural Marxist paradigm, accusations are evidence. Accusations are evidence. We explain this. And because the straight white male Christian man, Henry, was accused of doing a racism by a brown, non-white, non-Christian male and their family, the police, following the cultural Marxist worldview and paradigm, right, they gave the benefit of the doubt to the brown, and they gave no benefit of any doubt to the white, and they immediately aggressed him. They became physically violent with him, obviously, and the idea is, well, he was a white male, and maybe he said a racist thing. The implication, therefore, is that if you are doing a racism, you are deserving of death. That is what the paradigm's next level was demonstrating here. And I think this is what's so important for us to understand, how far into cultural Marxism the United Kingdom has slid as an administrative structure. People say systemic racism. Yeah, the anti-whites have a systemically racist, let's say, power in the United Kingdom. And as a result of his death, there have been a number of protests. And you'll notice the anti-whites who are in positions of power are condemning the protests who are of people upset by the anti-white policy, the explicitly anti-white policy that has resulted in the death of this young man. They're more upset that there's protests than there are about the reason they're protesting in the first place. Because it's like, well, you're whites, you should know better. You shouldn't be protesting. It's wrong to protest. Get back in your place. So the conversations are all happening in a context in which there is this very clear oppressor versus oppressive dynamic, the sort of expectation. And I'll also add that one of the most feckless responses to this that I'm getting rather tired of hearing is when we talk about in the book, Jack, you know what that paradigm is? It's well, what if the roles were reversed? Hypocrite much, huh? Hypocrisy. Oh, look at all this hypocrisy. What do we think about these hypocrisy claims, accusations, and finger wagging, Jack?
Well, of course, what we call this finger wagging, and of course, what we call all of this, is their accusations as a form of a spell, as a form of a hypnosis, whereby what they're doing is taking the training that they receive in these courses, and the training is, of course, geared to make them anti-white. And so the minute that you bring in one of these, anti-white sayings, then suddenly, he has invoked. We call it playing the race card. We actually know what this phrase is. We all use this phrase, but suddenly, when you play the race card, it creates this special lane of privilege for anyone who uses it in a capacity with individuals like police officers and law enforcement. And immediately, what they do is they take the side of whoever's non-white. making the accusation against the person who is white. And Joshua, this is where we need to dig in. This is where we need to go beyond just this case to understand the underpinnings of the system that made this case possible. There are groups, coalitions, call it what you will, who are anti-whites. And the anti-whites take power and they demand, this is why, by the way, that only certain countries are demanded to take in migrants, for example. This is why only certain groups are we told it's good that their fertility rates are down. It's good that there's less and less, fewer and fewer of them in the population. It's why the SPLC had a guy who was sitting in the back office who kept track of the decreasing white percentage of the population in the United States. What could possibly answer all that, Joshua?
I simply think that they're anti-whites, Jack. And this is where we return to what you said yesterday, which was that there's this white identity politics that has been created, not by white people, but rather pressed on to white people. You know, I've shared this story before that I grew up in a post-racial community, an evangelical Christian homeschool group that had more diversity than just about any community you could possibly imagine. The kind of a sort of a neoliberal paradise, let's say, of Asian people and Black people and people from Eastern Europe and all manner of languages and customs and ethnicities in this homeschool community. But we were a Christian, an evangelical Christian community, and we saw ourselves as believers. And in our worldview of humanity, there were the believers, there's Christians, and then there's the unbelievers and the non-Christians. And I think this is important to gather also, as there's a leaf blower outside my window. Not sure you all can hear it. Perfect timing. But it wasn't until I was in college when I realized that I was seen as white. I didn't realize that I was white until college, as odd as that sounds. But it was resentful, non-white, dare I say, anti-white professors who said, oh, here's what you know about you, Joshua, because you're a straight white male. And then they would list off all these horrific cracker stereotypes about me as a person, saying that these were obviously true about you. Therefore, you got to check your privilege. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And that's when I realized that identity politics, I'm not interested in that, but identity politics is interested in me.
And this is what we need to become the new understanding. This is what we need to make the new understanding of how our society works, how these policies and how these privileges, this new form of privileges, this new form of hierarchy, because that's what it is. There were people who were upset because they viewed, remember, in their view, it was not necessarily the true view, but in their view, there was an inverted hierarchy, or there was a racial hierarchy in America. So what they decided to do was they took their theory and they made an inverted hierarchy. And in the 1960s, and we do talk about this in On Humans, they created and began creating a set of principles to invert the hierarchy. And so things were done in the name of, and we all know about this, affirmative action and equality, which actually are directly anti-white policies and have always been from the very start. More on this when we return, myself, via phone or at least, and Joshua Lysek talking about the anti-whites. Right back to Human Events Daily.
About influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, he's done a great job.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec, we're back live here, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. Folks, 1 in 3 people will face cancer. and most never see it coming. Dr. Kelly Victory at the Wellness Company, she did everything right. She exercised, she ate clean, she avoided processed foods, and when she went in for a routine mammogram in July 2023, she had 0 symptoms. She walked out with an aggressive cancer diagnosis that could have been fatal if it had been caught later. That's the hard truth. Even healthy people do get cancer. It's true. And what to do? What can you do to help yourself out? Well, what you can do is understand that there's a bigger problem, that modern medicine is mostly reactive and not preventative. It's not at all. And as such, we have to understand that every day our bodies are under pressure, stress, toxins, inflammation, immune strain. Over time, that adds wear and tear and builds up quickly, slowly, until disease starts to take hold. So Dr. Victory asked a different question. What can we do every day to support the body before something goes wrong? That's what led her to SHIELD. SHIELD is a 2-part natural system designed to support immune balance, antioxidant defense, and cellular health. Systems that you want working if you want to stay healthy and long term. In the morning, you take the high-dose nutraceutical cocoa mix, then with food, take the soft gels, and with the ingredients involved like medicinal mushrooms, turmeric, green tea, olive leaf, berberine, black seed, cumin oil, SHIELD gives your body the support it needs to help keep cells healthy. Head to twc.health/POSO and use promo code POSO to get 10% off plus free shipping for U.S. residents. Again, that's twc/POSO and use promo code POSO for 10% off plus free shipping. So our guest here is Joshua Lisec, and he's the co-author of Unhumans. He's got a number of books that are already out. And what we need to understand is, Joshua, so many of these things are in place because we are told, that it's in the name of diversity, in the name of inclusion, in the name of equity. Ultimately, that's not true, is it, Joshua? Because that doesn't actually explain what we see. What we see is something else, and we need to understand that.
Yes, that's correct. What we have to come to understand is the way that the left-wing cultural Marxist oppressor versus oppressed worldview sees not simply people, but sees history. See, in the right-wing worldview, from the conservative vantage point, there are people, there are individuals, okay, individual rights, individual liberties, and whatnot. But the left-wing oppressor versus oppressed worldview casts people not as individuals, but as groups or as tribes with intersectional characteristics. And in that worldview, they have a model of history that is intergenerational, an intergenerational ledger. This is why you'll have, for example, radical second-wave feminists would say things like, men have been in charge for so long, so now it's our turn to be in charge of you, in order to justify hiring underqualified women over men who were more qualified or even simply actually qualified when the women candidates were not. And you might say, well, the men who don't get that job were never oppressive. But they're members of the tribe of men who have historically been oppressive, the second-wave feminists would say. And so in order to justify discriminating against individual people, against individual men, and nowadays against individual white individuals, including those as young as 18-year-old Henry and younger. You have to take this expansive view of history where equality really means equalizing the ledger. And they're saying, in the past, this is why the refounding of America from 1776 to 1619 was so important for the left-wing perspective. They had to say, for hundreds of years, whites have been oppressive to Black people. Therefore, anti-white systemic racism is only fair. We need to have our turn. And we found in the research for the Unhumans book, talking about the Haitian Revolution specifically, which was an anti-white, proto-communist, ethnic cleansing, and frankly, white genocide of Hispaniola in the Haitian revolutionary context. Later, the ex-slaves who had committed a number of atrocities against white and women and children, they had said, when they were spoken to, they said, I didn't want to be free. I wanted to be a slave master too.
So
And there's
Joshua,
that resentment, there's that revenge.
so Joshua, this type of, understanding of identity, this has never really been an identity that white people have sought. In fact, I would argue that white people have pushed back against any kind of white collective identity for years and years. But the unfortunate situation is that it's been imposed on whites as a group. And in many cases, one of the ways to look at it is just to simply understand that these individuals, like the stabber in Texas, or the stabber who's on trial right now, or the stabber here in the UK, or the stabber who slit the throat of Irina Zarutska, they weren't considering, the fact, oh, she's a Ukrainian, war refugee or anything. That they just saw a member of a tribe that was not their tribe, and they wanted to take them out. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, I think the tolerant American white citizenry doesn't understand the tribalism that is part and parcel to the rest of the world. And that, of course, is why communism has overtaken via revolution so many places around the world who are that are not Western. And that's why cultural Marxism had to sort of be mutated out of communism. It's a sort of a woke left-wing cultural ideology that takes the core paradigm of Marxism, of oppressor versus oppressed, and then slaps that onto the social order and the structure of laws in the United States and so on and so forth. But yes, you're correct that there has never been any kind of organized so-called white pride or white collectivization, because from the perspective of American whites, that's just weird.
Yes.
That's just not who we are.
Yeah, that's not something
do.
that's been sought, and yet it has been formed nonetheless. Joshua Lysek, thank you for joining us here, Human Events Daily. Today, the anti-whites.
Where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec, we are back live, Human Events Daily. Folks, as we're closing in the big 2-6, the election that's coming up, we're also looking at the Strait of Hormuz. We're looking at the conflict in the Middle East, the rest of it. We need to understand the situation at play. We need to understand all of the turmoil at play. Let me tell you something, folks. It's not a coincidence. I don't believe it is, and neither should you. Plus, our society faces additional challenges: high inflation, mounting debt, rising interest rates, and labor disputes. These factors further strain our economy, with escalating global tensions threatening to disrupt vital supply chains. There's a reason why so many patriots preserve their wealth with gold, because it stands on its own as a beacon of stability. And over the last 5 years, it's almost doubled in value. Allegiance Gold has done things the right way from the beginning, so it's no coincidence that they've earned the highest trust ratings in the precious metals industry, 5 stars with TrustLink, and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. Allegiance Gold can help protect your IRA with 401k, with physical gold and silver, or you can have it delivered securely to your doorstep. Get up to $5,000 in free silver on a qualifying investment when you go to protectwithposo.com. Give them a call, 844-577-POSO. Don't risk your financial future betting against these forces. Act today. Protectwithposo.com. That's protectwithposo.com, or call 844-577-POSO. I want to bring on now Rich Baris. He is the People's Pundit. And Rich, I want to get you in. We've had a number of elections this week. We've had Iowa, we've had California. I'll throw the round robin to you, brother. Which one do you want to crack into first?
Let's go into California first because everyone's still talking about it. If that's cool with you, and of course, thanks for having me as always. It's good to be here with you. Look, in California, I just want to give people it's a cautionary tale. California is election month, not election day, and anyone with access to voter files and absentee ballot tracking, Jack, like we do, knows, which I've been trying to explain to people, that Democrats, it's happened in California before. They held back their voting a little bit because they had a contested gubernatorial election that got, on their side. It's a jungle primary, but it had a shakeup with Eric Swalwell getting thrown out because Democrats were basically worried that 2 Republicans would end up getting in the jungle primary and locking them out, which is basically the only foolproof way of winning the state of California at this point. In the future, things will be different, but at this point, that is what it is. Everyone knew about Eric Swalwell's behavior, everyone on the Democratic side, everyone on the Republican side. The only reason Democrats objected to it suddenly, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, is because they were afraid that he was getting too much, and then Javier Becerra was behind him, and that they both were just not getting enough to end up in the top 2, and the sheriff and Steve Hilton could end up in top 2. So they got rid of him. In response to that, Democrats were kind of figuring out what to do, and the mayoral race in Los Angeles, same thing. There's Bass, who's not really popular, and then there's another contender who is, her alternative, and they were weighing their options. So they voted later in the process, and those votes are being counted now. So it's leading to people saying things like the governor of Florida, for instance, that Democrats are just cheating. Now, we all know Democrats do what they do in elections, but that's not really what's happening here. Those are later, more Democratic ballots.
And so here's one of the other, aside from that, though, Rich, one of the pieces that I want to talk about too, specifically on the LA race, and Steve Hilton will see on the governor's race. And one of the misgivings that I've had, and perhaps I should have said more about it earlier, is that the issue with LA isn't just the policy issues. The issue with LA, and I see this, it reminds me of a congressional election sometimes, where you get these guys who say, congressional candidate, I know you've seen them, Rich, where they have these great ideas and they have this great plan and this great marketing, but they don't actually look at the situation in the district, the situation with the voters. And in LA County, you've got a bunch of voters, and I'm just going to say it, Rich, I'm just going to say it. You got a bunch of voters in LA who don't care that the white neighborhood burned down. They just don't care, because it didn't affect them. It doesn't touch them. It has nothing to do with their neighborhood or the gravy train that they get from the government every single day. And who cares the white neighborhood came in? And by the way, there's even a bunch of them who probably think it's a good thing that the white neighborhood burned down, because then they can get Section 8 in there, then they can get the public housing in there, then they can get a bunch of that stuff. And Rich, I'm just going to say it, you can't have elections in cities like this. It's like that Tom Wolfe novel about Miami, right? You can't have elections in cities like this without addressing these issues or without understanding these issues. And I didn't see any effort from Spencer Pratt's campaign to address any of that. It's like he campaigned just to his neighborhood.
Yeah, and he said following the first round, when votes were being counted, things were looking good for him. He said, "This is great. It was the city was bigger than I thought. And now I'll have more time. It felt like it went too quick, and I didn't get to go to different parts of the city that I wanted to go to." That was really, it was an illuminating statement to me, right? You live in this area, obviously, not you, obviously Spencer Pratt. I mean, you should know how difficult it would have been to campaign in a giant city like Los Angeles. But Jack, I think you touched on something that Republicans are just uncomfortable talking about. And that's the problem, because politics is about relationships, and you just said something that is true. The fact of the matter is, there are entire blocks, huge blocks of voters by ethnicity and nationality and national origin that have absolutely no connection to the white neighborhoods, that absolutely have no connection to the Republican Party. And technically, this is a nonpartisan race, but give me a break. We all know who the lefts are, the rights are, right? And I don't think people understand it's not just about how's the crime rate, how what's the situation with the neighborhoods. This is to them reverse gentrification. It doesn't bother them at all, Jack. I mean, it's just a fact. Now the crime issue and stuff that's separate. But I put something out on social media the other day, which was a bit of unsolicited advice for Spencer Pratt, that if you continue at this rate, let's say he keeps in his second spot, which is possible he might not do, but let's just say he does, you're going to have to do something radically different. You're going to have to run a radically different campaign. And it's tragic because now is about the time where all of those GOP consultants start flooding people like him who win these like primary upsets, right? And they say it goes a little something like this, Jack. You guys did so good in the first round. You should be really proud of yourselves. But now, you're going to need some help. You're going to need help from the pros. You're going to have to let us take over. Good job. Well done, team. Good job, team. But now you got to let us in. And sadly, that happens more often than not. They're successful because they talk a big game and they look like winners. But in truth, they're professional losers. And none of them understand what you just said. And that's why they can't win these areas. Donald Trump gave Republicans a unique and an incredible opportunity to make inroads with voters like the one Spencer Pratt obviously is going to have to appeal to, younger, certainly less white. And unfortunately, most, if not all, of the Republican campaigns this cycle haven't taken the gift that Donald Trump has given them and run with it correctly at all.
I remember him, Pratt was campaigning to, and he would say, what was he calling her? Karen Basura. Like, oh, that's funny. Like she's trash, and we're gonna talk about in a Spanish language joke. I don't get what that is, right? Right? Is that something that the voters are gonna want? Because what President Trump did to working class voters was he went out and said, "Come vote for me. I will improve your living conditions today. I will take the conditions you are in and I will make them better. I'll put more money in your pocket." And he found a variety of ways to explain that. But if you don't campaign directly to voters from where they are, not just where you think they should be, but where they actually are and understand where they are, then you're not going to connect with them. You're not going to be able to move them. You're not going to be able to shift them into your lane. They are going to get up and say, yeah, my life is doing okay, or I'm going to vote for the person that's going to continue my gravy trains, or I got to make sure that check keeps coming in on the 1st and the 15th or whatever it is of the month, and that's it, first of the month, and I'm done. I don't really care that the white neighborhood burned down, and why should I? Because screw those white people, right?
That's the point,
unfortunately,
isn't it?
that's a huge part. That's a huge part of the process here, and a huge part of the issue when you're looking at that district, that municipality, as a political forum. Rich, we're up on a hard break, and so let's hold it right there. I'll get back to you for your response in just one moment. Folks, Human Events Daily, we are right back here on Real America's Voice.
Jack Posobiec Appreciation Hour. I can say confidently, I think Josh Shapiro would be the vice presidential nominee if it wasn't for Jack Posobiec. And that is, I'll be honest.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec, we are back live here, Real America's Voice. We're with Rich Baris, and we're talking about, now, Rich, let me ask you, we're talking about the LA mayor's race. And Rich, have you received any of the, have you seen it? I guess I don't even know if we can get exit polls in the LA mayor's race, which is amazing, by the way, that for a lot of people asking about, what's up with the LA results and the fact that we don't have them out yet. Why do we also not seem to have any exit polls out, or at least that I can't readily find? I'm using Google and AI to search, and I can't find them anywhere. It really really doesn't speak very well to the trust in our elections, does it?
It doesn't. And unfortunately, in the exit poll game, guys, which stay tuned because including Rav, I think we're going to be doing a separate alternative exit poll from now on everywhere. And we hope to start that with this year's midterm elections. Because unfortunately, after the 2016 bomb, which was just the latest in a bunch of other bombs from exit pollsters, which was done by Edison Research at the time and the National Election Consortium of media outlets. The AP and Fox News broke off and they did AP Votecast, which was great. It gave us an alternative. Now there's been scant exit polling. Edison has basically sold the exit poll consortium over to SSRS, which is the firm that conducts the CNN poll. So like this is where we're at here with exit polls in this country, Jack. It's not good. And then arguably, last cycle, even the exit polls were scant compared to last primaries, last year's primaries that we had gone through. And that also happened in 22 during that midterm cycle. So I would really like to see more exit polls in this country. But again, would I trust them? Almost certainly not, given that I trust about 2 or 3 people in this business. So that means I'm going to have to try to put this thing together myself. We don't have them. It appears we don't have them. And Jack, there's been a number of other races too where exit polls were absolutely
Rich, here's what I'm seeing. CNN has some kind of reporting on it. It's not an exit poll, but the one thing that they are saying is that the inroads that Pratt made were. It says that reports note that Pratt made notable inroads with white voters, especially on the West Side and in the San Bernardino Valley.
Votes.
Pratt's support
total.
came from a coalition including Republicans, independents, frustrated voters, often in whiter and affluent areas, upset about quality of life issues. So, Rich, I didn't even know that when I started talking about this. I just said I suspect that's what came in because it seemed like those were the only groups that he was actually campaigning towards. And I'm just going to say it, as a campaign, that's a problem if you're going into one of these areas that is very multicultural, that's very diverse, the way LA is. You can't campaign like that.
And Donald Trump did not get the vote share or the number of votes that he got in Los Angeles County and even in the city itself, which was an astonishing amount for a Republican presidential candidate, guys. If you didn't know, it's stunning. Go look at it compared to prior Republican presidents, even himself, by the way, in 2016. But he didn't do it. It's funny. All these like consultants and talking heads on, Fox News, when Trump first came to rose to prominence, they made it out like his campaign was a gimmick, but it wasn't. He was, what you said is right. He offered people something at that moment. Look, I think that Spencer Pratt's got a bunch of funny, ads, and he's got a lot of fresh new ideas, and that's good. But it's just that it's a bit of an insult to guys like me who do this for a living. It's a bit of an insult to act as if you can just get these less affluent, non-white areas by doing something like that. Guys, this takes real hard work, work that's not sexy. It's not cool. It doesn't trend, on X or any other, or Instagram. It is hard relationship building that takes time. And now if he does, again, let's say he moves on to the second round of the jungle, he has very little time to crisscross this city, Jack, and do 2 things. Begin to build those relationships, which he'll need if he wants to even have a prayer. Otherwise, he'll just be the latest right-wing California campaign that let everybody down. And then the second thing is that he needs to build a ballot-chasing, vote-chasing, and curing operation because Democrats have it on lock. And that is why we're waiting so long for these ballots all the time. They come back 90-10 Democrat and people flip out and pull their hair out. It's simply because no matter what you hear from California Republicans, they are full of it. They do not have a sophisticated curing operation in the state. It really not outside of some areas in the Central Valley, Jack, they basically don't have it at all. And that's just the truth. And in California, you may not like the rules, but you have to play by those rules in order to win. And then you can, when you win, you can change them. But you got to win first before you even begin to discuss that. Otherwise, you're really just complaining. So, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot more than just putting your name out there and running a campaign the way that Donald Trump made it easy. He made it look easy to do and make inroads with these groups. And then you have a lot of other candidates that come out and think, well, I'm going to get some kind of a wedge and I'm going to do it too. You can't. You're not Donald Trump. He's one guy. He's an enigma, a phenomena. It's different for him. And by the way, it's not as superficial as people often talk about it. It wasn't some superficial appeal. He had deep resonance with some of these people. And in 24, he was being persecuted by the state, which gave him a kinship with a lot of these non-affluent, less white communities. Because guess what, guys? Whether we want to admit it or not, they know the unfairness of the justice system a lot more than most of us do. So that gave them a kinship with Donald Trump. Like, the man's coming after him too. I'm on his side.
Yeah, there were so many things going for him. And by the way, that Tom Wolfe novel that I referenced earlier was Back to Blood. That's
Okay.
2012. But he also had the Bonfire of the Vanities, and in Bonfire of the
That's what I
Vanities,
was thinking
the
when you
plot
brought it up.
revolves around a guy who's very similar to Donald Trump. He's someone who was, I believe, is a bond trader, successful bond trader, but okay, real estate developer is like not too far off, very successful. The point was he was a WASP who was seen as a success, and that the entire city just kind of turned on him. Now, in that
class
case, he was
betrayer.
able to get off. He was able to get off because I remember the book. They find like a recording. It says he didn't really do it, but then he hits a kid while he's driving, and the kid is black, and it turns into this whole thing. And it ends up being not true. It ends up being like a completely false accusation. And point being, though, is that what Tom Wolfe did that was so incredible is he would go into these cities, New York in the 80s, Miami in the 2000s, and he would explain how this cauldron of tensions really does call back to, are people willing, what are the incentive structures? What are the incentive structures for power? What are the incentive structures for local politicians, for members of the local elite? Will they go along with someone who's obviously corrupt, like a Karen Bass, and just incompetent, because they're able to keep their gravy train going? And you know what? Tom Wolfe was 100% correct. And if you don't heed that warning, and you're trying to run for, mayor in a city like that, then I don't know. Like, I don't know how you're going to do. Last word to you, Rich Barris.
Yeah, I think that's really really important. Even if you're Steve Hilton, right? You have to understand that you're going to have to do something again that's radically different from what other people have done, and you can't just expect. I mean, it's almost like you have to get a little bit more serious than we've seen other Republicans approach the urban-rural divide, and that's why I do cheer on people like Spencer Pratt, and I definitely cheered on someone like Donald Trump, because to me, when you do narrow that urban-rural divide, what you're leading to a more stable society. If you're going to constantly have these rifts with the suburbs squished in the middle of the fighting, then obviously you're going to have a more disruptive society. But again, if you want to do this, you have to get more serious. All right, the like cliches and things like that are not going to do it.
It's not going to work. Rich, we are out of we are out of time, but. Let folks know your coordinates.
As always, the best places on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com, but on X and Gram is @peoples_punding. Go to the Gram. Let's go. Let's beef this thing up.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.